Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders. You can access the recording of this webinar on our website at www.nehatica.org within our webinar library. After completing this webinar, please complete the quiz if you are interested in receiving a certificate. You can find the quiz on our website next to the Watch Now button you selected to view this webinar. If you are a member of Nehatica NADAC, the certificate for this webinar is free, but if you aren't a member, the fee is $15. You'll receive a certificate worth 1 CE once you have completed and passed the quiz and paid for the webinar if applicable. Through the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders, this one-hour event is pre-approved by the New Hampshire Board of Licensing for alcohol and other drug use professionals as well as NBCC. If you have any trouble viewing this webinar or audio problems or have any technical questions, please contact us at 603-225-7060. Please email any questions regarding the material you see today at traininginstitute@nehatica.org. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our wonderful presenter, Leanne Dodge.
Good afternoon or morning, whenever you are accessing this webinar. My name is Leanne Dodge, and I am a certified prevention specialist, and I also have a master's degree in adult and higher education from the University of Southern Maine. And today's webinar is the high school to college transition, a risky time that's not as easy as we make it seem. And the what, the so what, and now what? How do we address this? So first, just to introduce a little bit about my background and why I'm interested in this topic. My first job, career-wise, I was a residence hall director at the University of New Hampshire, and I stayed there for 10 years and living on campus, starting out with a small all-female hall of like 120 residents, and by the end I was in charge of about 600 students in a residence hall kind of configuration. And I think that's when I first really realized about substance use and its impact on the brain and academics and overall success in college. So I did that, and then I worked for a couple years here in Concord, New Hampshire, at the New Hampshire Teen Institute, and worked with middle and high school students in prevention around alcohol and tobacco use. And I did that for a couple of years. Moved to Maine and worked for AdCare Educational Institute, doing community coalition work across the state of Maine with 9 coalitions, again focused on underage drinking and tobacco use. That turned into some other coalition work around the state of Maine, again working with all the different sectors of a community on prevention, with largely more adults in the community rather than just direct service or working with young people. And then I worked at the University of Southern Maine while I was getting my master's degree, and I was the coordinator of substance use prevention and intervention, and also the coordinator of wellness and assistant director of student life, and was there for about 9 years at USM. Then that turned into some more work with the state. And currently now, I'm heading into my 4th year as the program director of one of the drug-free communities coalitions in South Portland, Maine. And in Maine, we have 18 of these coalitions. And I've been working there again for 3 years in South Portland. So that's a little bit about me. And as we move on, I guess why I'm doing this program is, again, much of my career was working specifically on a college campus. So between USM and UNH, almost 20 years working with college students. And for the past 3 years now, I'm actually housed at a high school. I don't work for the school, but just have a great office in a high school of about 900 students. And I realized a couple things. One was, oh man, these students who go on to college, we may not be preparing them very well during their senior year, junior year of high school. And I think colleges assume we're doing a good job at preparing them for that next step. And on the other flip side, I know as working on a college campus, especially as a hall director, we thought that the high schools were doing a better job of preparing folks to be in college. And high schools now assume that the colleges are doing a really great job at orientation, which is usually just a couple days before a semester starts, and it happens in a hot gym, and covering really serious, heavy topics that colleges need to, have checked off their list, and really important foundational things that people need to know about the risks on being a college student, whether it is mental health issues, suicide prevention, sexual assault, sexual harassment prevention, substance use issues, how to do well academically. Like, all of this happens in 2 days, and or 3 for orientation. Sometimes it's happening in June before even people arrive on campus. Sometimes it happens right before classes start. So I had an aha moment of, okay, we need to improve both of those situations, that senior year in high school and the college environment, to know what kinds of students are we having, and are they prepared for this huge transition in college. So that's really what we're focusing on today in our learning outcomes, just talking about those developmental pieces for 18 to 25-year-olds. So again, mostly traditional age students I'm talking about for college students. I'm going to give you some effective prevention strategies, research-based, for that population, and give you some models and tools for substance use disorder screening, brief intervention, referral to treatment, and recovery support, and talking about what we're seeing on campuses and what has changed over these past few years. And I really encouraged you to reach out to me if you would like some more information on these different tools and strategies. So, first discussion questions. Which of the following are developmental factors for incoming first-year students? Again, traditional age. One might be, is the brain not fully developed until the mid-20s? Do they have a lack of clear identity and goals? Desire to assert independence? They have a disconnect with resources and support? Or is it all of the above? So think about those for a moment. And a discussion if you're sitting with other folks. So the answer is all of the above. So to hone in a little bit further about that, again, the brain is not fully developed till the mid-20s, but it is best for learning from age 13 to 20. One of the things I've noticed about high school students, in our school anyway, of 900 students, there's a thing called senior privilege. And seniors are allowed to, even, day one, senior year, if they're doing okay, I'm not sure what the academic requirement is, but if they're doing okay in school or pretty well, they actually have senior privilege where they can come to school late and they can leave early. And they can miss things like advisory times, which are what we used to call study halls. They don't have to go to those. They can leave school anytime, go to Amato's, have lunch, come back, sleep in. And this is happening their senior year. Also, juniors are allowed to start it and practice it the May of their junior year to kind of get ready to be senior privileged. And one of the things that was concerning to me is, okay, if the brain is best for learning from 13 to mid-20s, and a whole year of that is not really being well spent in the learning process their senior year, and especially after students who might get accepted to college, they might find out in February or March, and so they're already in, so they might not have much academic rigor. And what they might not realize is they might not have anything due in college until the next October. So if you think about that, it could be 6 or 7 months of not really using or practicing skills for college, which is months away. We also know about math skills, which everyone has to take math in college. And math actually needs to be practiced daily for someone to have it in their brain. It's one of the topics that has to be often repeated and practiced. And so you think about how many students aren't really big fans of math, have to take it in college, and haven't been practicing it for many months beforehand. So that's one of the things to think about. The other thing about that mid-20s, that 13 to 20, we know that addiction to substance use happens typically 90% of it before age 18, kind of that getting ready in the brain. So again, thinking about the brain and how great it is for learning without much effort. So if I teach it good things will stick. If I teach risky things, that too is more likely to stick and harder to undo. We also know that a lot of times young people are sensation seeking. So they like that adrenaline rush feeling in the brain and more likely to take risks because that part of the brain that's not fully developed is the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of judgment, reasoning, caution, and intelligence. So that's not fully developed. And they might have more difficult, again, with critical thinking and problem solving skills with that part of the brain. And again, weighing risks is more difficult. Also, the brain is ready to take risks at age 13. That's the part of the reward center of the brain is fully developed at 13. So you can see how that is a difficult and maybe risky time. The other pieces, again, like you see here, many people might feel like they have immunity from having problems. They might not see any of the downsides of substance use that if they're already starting with that. Immortality, bulletproof vests, that things don't, this is just for now, live in the moment. Some students don't have a clear set of who they are yet, what they're all about. The goals that they have aren't maybe fully set in. We oftentimes would see students with certain goals and majors that they wanted to start with, sometimes, pretty tough majors, engineering, STEM classes, other, maybe double majoring. And we might see if someone's using substances during college, those goals might start to change and lessen in rigor. People might change majors, it's getting too difficult. So some of those things can also shift for someone. And, now we've got freedom going on, desire to assert independence. I remember one student years ago asked me, when I was a hall director, what time do we need to be in by? And I remember laughing like, yeah, never. Like, no one's going to be, it's not 11 o'clock p.m. curfew. So that amount of independence is quite a shift from what they might have experienced in high school. And going off to college, even if it's nearby, there's a disconnect with the supports and resources that may have already been so accessible in high school. Now, I know in our high school, we have 4 social workers, we have guidance counselors, we have all the support, teachers, coaches at the ready to talk to. You run into them, school resource officer, all those people are right in the building. You're there for 6 or 7 hours a day. And now you're on a college campus, maybe in a whole new location that you're not familiar with. And maybe this can be difficult in getting support. So how is high school different from college? Here's a few things we know. I just spoke about senior privilege. And in high school, many students find that they don't have to do a ton of homework or a lot of studying for their coursework. And they can maybe retake a test. They might delay taking a test. They don't feel good. I know some students stop by my office and I have a big papasan chair and they sit down in it and I'll say, where are you supposed to be right now? Oh, I have an English test, but I just don't feel like taking it right now. But he's cool about it. I can take it next week. Or I might stay after school and I'll swing down to the nurse and get a note. So just that different, again, expectations and second chances, and maybe I can do extra credit and they're going to give me some extra time to do this. So that's in high school. And I might not have to study too hard, or I study on the bus on the way right before an exam. I've got study halls right there. If I do, if I'm not sleeping in, I might go to a study hall and get extra help. Now switch to college where you may only be in class 12 to 15 hours a week, and they recommend studying 2 to 3 hours for every hour in class. So that is a whole new frontier for someone and not typical for someone to have done in high school. Also with the teaching, we often, in colleges, if you talk to faculty, a lot of them were trained to be the sage on the stage. So someone who knows that content of their specific topic, specific course, and that's what they, are passionate about. Oftentimes, they're much more passionate about the actual teaching, the actual topic. Maybe secondary is the teaching of it. So that might be a different piece, whereas in high school, it might be reversed, that people got into teaching because they really wanted to work with students and help them and enjoy and learn about their topic, and are more of a guide on the side and really helping and moving people along. They have a mixture of students and abilities, so they might have to give extra time for everyone to get on board and to be successful in the class. The other key thing, again, is that asking for help. A lot of times, students in college, we know that professors offer and instructors office hours. So, a student, if they are struggling, they need to go to the professor and meet with them. And that can feel really intimidating. And someone might get the courage up to finally say, so again, if someone didn't have any tests or anything due till mid-October, and maybe there's only a midterm and a final in the class. There's not all these little quizzes all the time for many courses. So maybe I don't really know I'm doing poorly until November. And now there's about 5 weeks left before the final. And I've got to turn this D around, or whatever my not good grade is. So now I've got to go to the professor and ask for help. And that could be, again, it's on the student. That's the other thing about a college campus. Tons of resources, tons of support, tons of offices and advising and counseling services and health services at most campuses. And it's all there for you, but you have to ask for that help. You might be living on campus and have a resident assistant, a resident director that can kind of spot when something seems to shift in a person, and there's signs and symptoms of that someone's struggling, that people are, in tune to look for. But we also know that resident assistants are also students and are juggling their own expectations and things that they have to be doing. And so again, that's a new shift for a college student. They've got to ask for help. It's their responsibility. And managing their own time. There's not someone saying you need to be in by 11. And I noticed you didn't have breakfast today. And I'm going to pick you up after school and take you to that dentist appointment. And, again, managing your own time, what's due, when is it due, how do I be successful? And again, we talked about orientation, that again, for college orientation, it's usually a couple of intense, busy days of heavy topics that have to be covered. And, again, it's maybe not on the priority of some new incoming freshmen, that they're going to hear about like really heavy risk-taking issues and things to fear maybe and dread and worry about, when really they just want to meet some friends, find out who their roommate is, fit in, all these other things are maybe more of a priority in the brain. They're exhausted. That's the other thing. A lot of times, the nerves and anxiety of going to college the night before, you may not have had 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And here you are now listening to some really heavy topics. And that's and here, we'll do a campus tour and all these things to kind of take in. It's a lot to ask for a campus to do all at once. And it's a lot for a young person to take in and understand. The other key thing, again, in managing time, is there's 160 hours in a week. And if someone were to get 8 hours of sleep and 8 hours a week of being in class and studying, maybe 4 hours for getting ready, showering, eating, and thinking about that, and the studying and things, maybe not on the weekends, but how many hours are left of free time in a week? And when you ask students, they go, 20 probably, or 10. It's actually 44 hours of free time. So it's almost a full-time schedule of nothingness, right? 44 hours. And so thinking about, and some people might not even have 8 hours a day of classes and studying, or getting that full 8 hours of sleep. So maybe someone has 50 hours a week of free time. What they found is that students who work or are involved up to 20 hours a week are more likely to succeed in college and more likely to graduate on time. So sometimes parents will say, I don't want you getting involved in anything this first semester. I just want you to hit the books, study, and hunker down and you can get involved in things later. That's actually really not good advice to give to a young person. We want them to be engaged and have more of a busy schedule than only 15 hours in class and nothing else is expected or required. So we really do want people to either have a job, work study if they have that, or again, co-curricular activities, new things to figure out and discover your passions with. So one of the things we often do is to weigh the pros and cons of substance use for people. And we start with thinking about, well, what's the good stuff about using substances? I think alcohol, marijuana, other drugs. And the pros are often that it's social, you meet people, great stories the next day, it's fun, you can experiment, you might be better at things when you're impaired, or if you're talking about marijuana, maybe I'm using it to relax or just to escape from things or get high. And again, that social connection, that fun, that fitting in. So those are some of the pros. If you move down to the cons of using, we can look at specifically for college life that maybe I'm not doing well academically. I might have done some embarrassing things, hangovers. I might have had a blackout where I don't remember what's happened, sexual assaults, overdose. Some really, really long-term negative things can happen and short-term pieces. So some not good things can definitely be the cons of using in high-risk ways or with alcohol, different drugs, and mixing them. So different cons. It could be costly. I might have to take a class again. So then you can also look at, well, what are the pros and cons of not using? And if you think of the cons of not using, that means I'm maybe not fitting in, or it's kind of boring, and I might not have as many friends, or maybe have to take care of other people. And just thinking about, how that might be more challenging when I'm first on a college campus. I want to make connections and friends, and this is a really easy way to do it, is to use. But now I've got to maybe find the people who aren't using it. I might have the idea that everyone else is doing it and I'm not. So those are some cons. And then the pros, of course, are better grades, better health, not getting in trouble. It's not as costly. I'm more likely to graduate on time. I might have better friendships, stronger ones than just acquaintances. So really helping young people weigh the pros and cons of their using. And the pros of not using and the cons of using can be really long term, long lasting, where the pros of using and the cons of not using are really short term, in the moment kinds of things. So weighing those risks and for a student to look at. So what are some other issues connected to substance use? We know that these all appear listed, the academic performance, again, not doing well academically and missing classes if I'm hungover or not understanding the concepts because some brain changes and I might be even have some substances still processing in my brain while I'm in class, or again, just not going. Some of the more serious things can be accidents and injuries that can happen when someone's impaired. And this is from someone's own use. Then there might be relationships problems with my roommate, being in trouble on the floor that I'm living in, or if I'm living at home, there can be some relationship problems happening. Sexual assault, sexual harassment can be happening, mental health, increased risk for depression, anxiety, suicide, legal problems. We'll talk about that as well. What are some things if I were to get arrested or have a criminal record? How could that impact those careers? Like implications, again, people shifting their expectations of what they can take on academically and those goals of maybe more rigorous careers, rigorous majors that maybe now I'm going to take something that I don't have to take math too much of, or kind of don't have as long of classes to be at, and I really don't want Friday classes, and I don't really want morning classes, and I'm only going to take classes Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you can just see how that becomes less of a priority as the academic and career plans. And then, of course, the health problems of starting to develop alcoholism and addiction, and continuing to have this health problem not just during college, but that it could continue on after college, that I'm setting some patterns of behavior. And then again, death, overdose. We have about 1,800 college students die each year in the United States. Most of those are from driving crashes, impaired driving, but others are from injuries, fallings, drownings, alcohol overdose, which some people call alcohol poisoning, but it's really an overdose. So those are from someone's own use. Now, what about secondhand consequences? Think about how one person's use could affect others. So can it interfere with somebody else's sleeping time? If a roommate comes in at 2 a.m. and their studying might be interrupted as well. Some people feel like they have to take care of other students who are impaired and watching out for them. And that's can, again, take up time and be stressful. Someone's own stuff, property damage could be happening in the halls and people held responsible. People getting insulted, unwanted sexual advances, and being assaulted. Again, cleaning up after other people. So this use can not only impact the user, but also the people around that student. One of the other things to look at is kind of the wellness wheel. And I put down wellness wheel and weed, but it can really be any substance. But when you think of all the spokes of this wheel, ask yourself which ones could substance use impact. And if you look at these, it's really all of them. So it can impact someone socially, financially, intellectually, spiritually, culturally, emotionally, and physically. And what we're finding with marijuana specifically is for many students, it really fills a lot of these spokes for them, and they really have, that spiritual connection is strong. They find marijuana really helping them with so many different aspects of their life, where they might, again, use it to relax, because it's more of a sedative, and they might use it to be creative, right? So in higher doses, it can be a hallucinogen. So really tied up in a lot of their day-to-day expectations that they have to have. I apologize, there's someone mowing the lawn behind me. I'll talk a little louder. And so again, when we're seeing someone with alcohol use, oftentimes they're using it to be social. They often use it in celebratory ways or opportunistic moments, right? So they'll say, well, let's drink Thursday night. There's a football game, homecoming's coming up, or there's a big party, Halloween. With marijuana, I would find when I meet with students that they were using daily and a few times a day, where usually folks in college, that traditional age, are probably not drinking every day. The majority aren't drinking all the time. And they're usually doing it with other people, not to say that that's not risky, but with marijuana, I would see students using alone and often. So the other piece around prevention is you might hear people say, well, if I could just save one life, that will be all that matters, right? If I could just tell my story and reach one person. And it reminds me of that story of the starfish, if you've heard that poem before, where a young man's walking on the beach and there's all these dying starfish floating up onto the shore. And this young man keeps starting to throw them back into the ocean. And an old man sees this person say, why are you doing this? You're never going to save them all. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. And the young man holds up a starfish and says, well, it matters to this one. It makes a difference to this one. And with prevention, we want to actually figure out, well, why are the starfish coming up on shore? And that bigger bang for your buck, you might want to say. But in college work with prevention, we want to do what we call environmental strategies. but we also want to work with the starfish. So we want to actually hone in on those students who are struggling and provide some early intervention with them. But we don't want to just do those individual starfish. That can't be our only method of working just one-on-one. Again, as a hall director, if I had said to my resident assistants, hey, you have a floor of 40 people, but if you can just touch one life and help one student, then that will make all the difference in the world. That would be irresponsible of me. So really thinking about the whole environment in which these students are living. We use the public health model. Again, we're looking at the environment, the host, the agent, and again, in the middle of the disease. So maybe thinking of that as substance use, and what is the agent causing that, which substances, what are the host as the students, and looking at the environment around. And that's how that interacts. So using a public health approach. And environmental prevention, again, here's a kind of quote of holding young people solely responsible for underage drinking is like holding fish responsible for dying in a polluted stream. So what we want to do on a college campus and in that community around the campus, what is in the water, what's in the stream, and how can we make some changes? Here's some factors that can contribute to alcohol and other drug use. Again, we spoke about unstructured free time. So that can be risky to not have much to do. I wanted to also mention oftentimes students are coming from maybe smaller communities, smaller high schools, and they might be a big fish in a small pond in high school with a lot of attention or a lot of successes and maybe some privilege of people knowing them, since they were in kindergarten. Then they go to a university, a college campus with people they don't know. It's a larger group, different age groups perhaps, and maybe not well known yet. And I know for me, I was a minister's daughter in a small town in New Hampshire, Walpole, New Hampshire, and everyone knew my dad. Everyone loved my dad. I had a lot of, extra clout because people were like, your dad's awesome. And then I get to UNH, where I also went to undergrad. No one knew Ray Fenner, who, whatever. And so starting over. And so thinking about big fish, small pond in high school, and then switching that to a really big pond, and I'm a small fish, and I'm a freshman, and I'm starting over. And I had a student that was a soccer star in high school, and he came to UNH and didn't make the team. And I just saw him really spiral, because you think about being on a soccer team, how much time that takes, right? So you're practice, you go to games, you're on long bus rides to get to other schools to play, you're part of a team, you're part of a group, and then to see this student have none of that anymore, and he just started drinking because that filled that time. And so that again is that risky, and how do you keep the student engaged in some new activities? And I remember saying to him, well, why don't you play broom ball, a 6-week club sport, or pretty lame substitute for someone who was, a really great soccer player, and now no longer had that in his life. So another piece, again, another factor in contributing to use is, that belief that alcohol and other drug use is normal. And you might see signs. I remember seeing a t-shirt that said, college, the best 6 years of your life. Rehab is for quitters. And you can think of all the social influences, songs, movies, even times of the year on a college campus. If you sat right now, if you've gone to a college or university yourself, when were those times when there was high risk drinking or drug use? And it was maybe at the beginning of a semester before things were getting too difficult. There's homecoming, alumni weekend, Halloween. If you're a part of the Greek system, there might be social events, pledge dances, other socials, parts of huge sporting events, using beforehand, using at those games, lots of different times through a semester. I remember a lot of people would use during finals, which you think, oh gosh, what a not good time to use substances or to be drinking. But your roommate might be leaving because they're done with finals Tuesday and you have to stay till Thursday for your last final. So you're going to go out Tuesday night to say goodbye to your friend who you're not going to see till next semester or, all through the summer. So again, that belief that college, is just this time of using, and most, just having that idea that everyone uses all the time. And if you don't, you're, a loser. So just some of those feelings. Again, think of those teen movies. What are the non-user kids pictured as in those movies? They're seen as kind of nerds, band kids, geeks. And you think of the students who are using, they're the cool, popular. So we really train young people to think that using is the way to go and it's an expectation and that it's normal. And again, we see a lot of promotions targeting young people. And now if you think back to just having signs put on your car windshield for drink specials at a local bar and ladies' night, now think of social media and Instagram and Twitter and all Facebook and ads that are just constantly with videos and showing cool stuff, and YouTube, that there's just promotions, again, specifically targeting young people. And that's another piece. It's very available to use substances on a campus. A lot of students will say, hey, it's easier to get a drink or a joint than it is to borrow a pen, that it's, you can just walk down the hall and you can find it. And there's older students that could buy for you, or you can get fake IDs. And depending on what states you're living in, I know for us, we have legalized recreational marijuana in Maine, and the retail shops are going to start opening in March. So really even much more accessible for marijuana as well. And inconsistently enforced laws and policies. So that can be another factor where that people, whether it's, again, resident assistants, maybe not always consistently enforcing the policies on campus, or there could be on-campus security. There could be differences in bias on a college campus of not getting students in trouble who might be athletes, because that could impact them being able to play. So again, whether it's law enforcement not being consistent in the community, there's those town and gown issues where some campuses really do not want the police on their campus. It doesn't give a good look to have kids getting arrested and having to pay fines. And so sometimes campuses are like, we're going to take care of this ourselves. We're going to hire our own private security folks. So things might not be handled in the same way depending on the place. So here's some environmental strategies to deal with those factors that contribute to use. And we'll talk about what those environmental strategies, what to do about that to change the environment. Then we also want to do educational strategies with students. We want to intervene with those who might already have started using. And again, enforcement can be a powerful element of how to address and do prevention and intervention. And you can't just do one of these. You can't just say, let's do some cool bulletin boards or do a program down in the lounge. And then someone will know the risks and the harms, and they're not going to do it. And you can't just have enforcement strategies. And some campuses are dry, and they'll say there can be no use here, and if you do use, you're kicked off campus. That there's all these components, and especially, again, early intervention, we need to get right on that and have the capacity to intervene with students who might be struggling. So the next piece of this are the aspects of environmental management, environmental strategies. And as we said earlier, how available are these substances and all that goes with it, and where are they found on a campus? Where are people using? Are they using in the residence halls? Are they using in fraternities and sororities? Are they tailgating? All those places, looking at that. And really what can be helpful is to do a mapping exercise to look at your own campus and see where are the hot spots, where are people possibly using. Again, letting students know about what is their expectations and what are the policies, what happens if someone is held accountable. And oftentimes people, again, they hear about it at orientation at their first floor meeting, and you can find it. We used to handbooks with all the laws and policies and go over them during one of those first nights of someone being on campus. And these are residential students. And now it's usually online, and you'll ask students, when do you know about these laws? When do they come into play? And it's typically only when someone gets in trouble that they would really look into that. So think about commuter students who, aren't even having that floor meeting. Again, looking at the norms and attitudes, the actual and perceived that we talked about, like if everyone's doing it, I'm more likely to do it, can be a social norm. And that at school and no one takes Friday classes, and really looking at faculty and saying, we actually want you to offer Friday classes. We want you to have that expectation, because that might even be helpful for a student to know that they do need to go to class 8 a.m. on a Friday morning. And maybe they won't be making high-risk choices the night before. Again, how cheap pricing and promotion of substances. And then another piece is, if we're asking people not to use or not making high-risk choices, what else is there to do on campus? What are some healthy and happy risk-taking opportunities? And it doesn't always have to be doing, whitewater rafting and jumping out of a plane to be a healthy risk-taking opportunity. It can be trying out for a play on campus, or trying out for a group, or playing ultimate frisbee, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be super risky, but we have to provide those alternatives. And I remember asking some students who were RAs, and what were they going to do the first night or two of being on campus in the fall. And this one group of folks said, we're going to do an ice cream social, and we're going to do rock painting the first night. And the rocks were to hold your door open so that you can mingle and get to know folks down the hall. And I thought, oh, is that really the most exciting, best, fun thing for a first year student to experience? Like, wow, it was so awesome. And it was over by 8 o'clock at night. So what do we do, and what do we provide for students to have those healthy alternatives and fun ones, not just, quiet time, but some fun things in order to have those pros of using fun, storytelling, connecting, making friends, relaxing, all those escaping from stress. We want to provide that box of pros for young people without using substances. If you think again about social influences on a campus, and where people are even coming in from high school kind of expecting, is really large, fun parties, and just all, that there's just fun every time you turn around. There's an opportunity, and we hear that in song lyrics, movies, TV shows. Again, different times of the year. You can think of every month of a calendar of when there might be times to make high-risk choices, again, on a college campus, that there's influences all around our students and our young people. If you go to a restaurant, what's the first thing they ask you? They ask you, what would you like to drink? And they give you a huge binder now of all the different cocktails. And you go, oh, well, I just would like some water, and then you never get the glass of water for a long time. The food is now on one little sheet of paper. So you can even see the shift in our communities around that social influences. But here's the actual norms. 20% of college students don't use at all. 60% use, but not in really high-risk ways. So they're not getting super impaired. They might not have those negative consequences of happening. And then we do have 20% of folks who are using in high-risk ways and need to have some intervention. And here's this part of this best practices is one of them is education, and showing and helping people with harm reduction. And I think people get worried about the word harm reduction that says, like, hey, you're still saying you're expecting them to use. But truly, harm reduction, what's the most harm reduction is not using at all. So to remember that is maybe not always the goal for someone to be zero, not using at all, but to reduce their use and make some changes. Using cognitive behavioral skills. Some of the things we use is showing people what a standard drink is, and kind of showing with different containers. Oftentimes people count their drinks by whatever they're drinking out of, and really embracing that someone could actually be in a social activity and not use, and sometimes embracing the red Solo cup, that someone could put non-alcoholic liquids in there, water that people really, because it's not see-through, looking at what are some ways to reduce risk, and it can be, again, slowing down, eating first, not drinking really potent things, and challenging people's expectancies. Like, hey, if I were to get really impaired, am I going to be sexier? Am I going to be more fun? Is, all those, am I going to meet more people? Is that really true when I get so impaired? Or is it going to be some of those negative things? And what we do know about alcohol in the young brain, that it acts more like a stimulant. So when we've told people, hey, it's a depressant, if you drink, you're going to be lonely and bored and in a corner and no one's going to like you and you're tired, that actually it acts like a stimulant till about a 0.06 blood alcohol level. So if we could teach young people how to make low-risk choices and have maybe that stimulant effect of alcohol versus really getting impaired. And how could you stay at a 0.06? Well, slowing down, not drinking really potent substances, etc. So there's ways we can teach people lifelong skills around lowering their risk. And again, there's different ways to get the word out there. So in other, it would be great for faculty, depending on what their course is, to integrate some of this information. And again, doing stuff online, social media, in the residence halls, having things online for people to do their own screening if they are worried about themselves. So really a number of ways to educate students about this. Here's a discussion question. Which of the following can contribute to substance use? And we've talked about some of these things. Unstructured free time, belief that substance use is normal, aggressive promotions, and inconsistently enforced laws and policies. And again, for your discussion at your end, it's really all of the above that can contribute to use. So, why do we care about this, especially for the brain and learning? And the whole purpose of being in college is to get a degree and to learn and kind of find your passion and your next steps after you graduate. And substance use can definitely get in the way of those goals. And now with colleges are much more expensive than I know when I went to school back in the 80s. UNH was $5,000 a year, including room and board. I never had a college loan, and I have, I just think about the amount of debt students are accruing, and sometimes it's a house mortgage, right? And sometimes they'll have all this debt and not have a degree because they didn't finish. We're seeing more students dropping out or stopping out, so going for a little while, needing to take a break, not doing well academically, having to retake a class, and this is just really mounting the debt that people have financially. So a couple things about the brain and how substance use can impact learning is that it interferes with people's abstract and critical thinking skills, and those are the skills we need to figure out things that are not right in front of us. So you can think of, ask students, what classes do you need those for? Well, math, physics, chemistry, English, philosophy, psychology, art, you can go on and on. It's actually all classes. We need those skills, all of them. You can ask people what they're involved in outside of academics. So if they're an athlete, musician, artist, all of those different co-curricular things need abstract and critical thinking skills. So people can say, well, just don't do puzzles while you're drinking and you'll be all set. But it actually has a 72-hour impact on those skills after one night of drinking. So if I drink on a Thursday night, that means Friday, Saturday, not till Sunday is my brain able to access these skills as well. And then if I also drank Saturday night, that's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, not till Wednesday do I have those skills. So even just 2 nights a week of high-risk drinking can leave me with really not great skills. And now it can affect my academics and other things that are important to me. Alcohol interferes with REM sleep, and REM sleep we know is where we have store any of the information that we learned during the day. That's what happens in REM sleep, which is one of the deepest phases of sleep. It's when our synapses and dendrites in our brains connect. We also do problem solving in REM sleep, but not just math. But think of our brain as a cluttered desk when we go to sleep at night. And if I get REM sleep, I actually organize and store information, organize that desk full of clutter. And again, problem solving is essential in our lives. So not just academics, but what if I'm fretting about things or anxious and I'm not getting REM sleep? So REM sleep is so critical. Well, alcohol in high risk amounts, so that's again more than 5 drinks for males in one sitting and more than 4 for females in one setting. Alcohol doesn't let someone get into REM sleep. It interferes with that. So even if I got 10 hours of sleep, crawled my way to the dining hall, I still didn't get REM sleep. And that can really have an impact on academics and overall health. We also see with alcohol and marijuana interferes with short-term memory. So if I'm in class and I'm not taking in the information and storing it to long-term memory, you can see how that can have an impact on learning. And I can remember things from way back, but things that just happened, I don't remember. And in college, the next time I have class, my professor typically doesn't repeat the whole lecture in case anyone was impaired. Right? It's a train going forward, and if I've missed that one class, or they're not even being there at all, or not taking it in, I'm going to have a hard time doing well academically. It can also affect my job, academics, athletics, music. You think of, again, all the different things someone might be doing with their time, and if they don't have good short-term memory, that can really impair a lot of things. Some people experience lower verbal IQ with alcohol and marijuana, where they maybe can't access words as well. So it doesn't mean they're not smart, but they can't, describe things, or maybe I can think of a couple words to describe something, but now I have to write a 10-page paper. How tricky would that be? And also we see with marijuana, there's an increase in theta waves, even when someone's not using. And those waves are the waves we see in the beginning of sleep. So think of that great feeling you have right before you're going to fall asleep. You have your head on the pillow. You're going to fade out. And that's a great feeling. However, what if you felt like that for most of the day, that you just couldn't get yourself going in those theta waves? Also, it can affect people's focus. So some people say, hey, marijuana helps me focus. I can really get in the zone and write a paper, and it's really creative. It's actually the inability to shift attention to something else. And while marijuana is leaving my brain, the rebound effect is that I'm not able to focus. And what will help me focus again? Using more often, so I can keep on going. The other thing that people will experience is something called state-dependent restriction. So that means if I learn something when I'm impaired, it's best recalled when I'm impaired. So typically it's social skills in the beginning, where talking to people or dancing or playing drinking games or singing, remembering names. And I cannot do that as well until I'm back in that window. And it starts at about a 0.08 blood alcohol level and moves up to about a 0.11. Anything I learned in there, I can really only do at my best when I'm back in that window. So now I'm going to pre-game. You ask students, they go, I would never go to a party sober. Are you kidding me? I got to drink first to kind of get in that window before I even arrive. So those are things that can impact us. Some other educational things is to show people and have them figure out, well, what actually is a drink? Most people underestimate how much they're drinking. So that's an opportunity to really get people to think about that. And I know students would tell me, oh, I thought of you this weekend. I know that I was really drinking 9 drinks and not 3. So just some of this education can be just moments long. It doesn't have to be an hour in the lounge of educating people, but it can be just something really cinchy and using a number of different classes and food coloring and water to show people this. We also do some more information now with edibles. And if you made a pan of brownies and had students, again, without THC, and have someone just take a bite of one, that it can be 1 dose of THC. And again, in lower doses, it can be sedative. And in higher doses, it can be a hallucinogen. Now, so someone takes one bite of a brownie, and they're not going to actually feel its effects for maybe a half hour to up to 2 hours. So what might someone do? And kids all say, eat another bite. Well, would anyone ever eat a whole brownie? And of course, and now in higher doses, it can be a hallucinogen, which might not kick in again for a couple of hours. Why might that be risky if someone's hallucinating? And what is a dose, and are all those brownies the same size? So really knowing that marijuana and THC can be really unpredictable for a person. And then, of course, we see more vaping on campus. That happens before, and really letting students know about the risks of nicotine, and that actually primes the brain for other addictions. So if someone starts using alcohol or marijuana after vaping, it's more likely to stick. We're seeing, of course, in the news, all the health risks that people are really experiencing, and it's young people experiencing these lung issues, and there's been some deaths. And some people say, well, it's just the black market THC ones that people are experiencing, but there have been some health risks and real concerning issues of people just using store-bought Juuls and other vaping devices. So it's really having an impact on people's overall health. And it's not water vapor, people, it's aerosol that they're taking in, and a lot of other chemicals. FDA does not require companies to say what is in these devices. So again, vaping is really concerning for our students. We can also show people what happens with someone when they've had too much to drink or alcohol overdose. That's just another place to point out what can happen in the brain and how to look out for other people. So that bystander effect. And the Don't Be a Zebra is there's a tale about what happens when zebras are all hanging around and a lion comes and kills one of them. What do the zebras do? They actually just stand and watch, and they don't do anything. So how to intervene, how to know the signs and symptoms of someone. Everyone has a phone now, so what are the policies on a campus? And these are all things that can be taught to high school students before they even arrive at college. And here's a number of ways to do that early intervention. And one of the best programs is BASICS, Brief Alcohol Screening and Intervention for college students. And that is a 2 to 3 session program to intervene with students. They do a number of assessments, and then they monitor their use in between the first session and the second session. And they get feedback from their self-screened assessments. So it's nothing that the facilitator says like, oh, I think you have a really bad problem, but they've done their own assessments, and you give them the feedback about what those assessments are telling. The third session could be that the student just goes on to see one of the counseling staff if they need more treatment. So BASICS is not treatment, it's an intervention, and it's actually best done by people who are not counselors, right? It's best to do just with staff that, again, can assess and give feedback and teach some harm reduction skills as well. There's eChug, eToke, it's online self-assessments. The University of Southern Maine, if you go onto their website, you can see Screen You, which is, again, another opportunity for someone to use and look at their different substance use, if they use different, there's alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, etc. Another great program is Prime for Life that we use in Maine, and it's used across the country, and that is another prevention program that really helps people look at some research-based information and helps them assess where they might be on their use, and can be really effective. It's a 12-hour program that people can use. And for students who might have gone through BASICS and are still choosing to use BASICS, when we used it at USM, 80% of students who went through it did not reoffend the substance use policy. And some people might go, well, I bet they're still drinking, but what if they are doing it in less harmful ways? What if they're eating now? What if they're pacing? So again, some life skills. Prime for Life comes from the Prevention Research Institute, and they've also created a new program called 420, which is just for marijuana use. And that's, again, another great program that could be implemented on our college campus. We've also created a program called the Party Program, which is promoting alcohol responsibility through you. And if you're interested in that, I can send you the curriculum. Again, really hones in on bystander intervention. And we created a 1-hour nicotine intervention with all the vaping that's been going on, which is based on tobacco intervention, which I'm also happy to share. We have an informational rack card about, it's called Who Knew, and it's another tool to educate students on if they were to get a criminal record due to their alcohol or drug use. There's a number of licensed professions they might not be able to attain, and to really think about the choices they make after they're 18 when they get to college campus. As a student, these things can stay on their record and interfere with the whole reason that they're there is to get a career, perhaps, and what kind of choices they might be making that could be more long lasting. And we're seeing more recovery opportunities on campuses. The University of Southern Maine has the Rock. There's also recovery residence halls, chem-free floors, that we're really seeing more young people needing to be in that environment, and that are actually living on campus can be riskier than living off campus, even with resident assistance and campus security and programs and all this, that because substances are so much more accessible when you're living on campus, that can be risky. So really having places where people can live. We need to look at the whole continuum of care on a college campus and have those opportunities for prevention and intervention and treatment and recovery on a college campus, or at least connected to the community outside of the campus to provide that for students. And to think about just the future. We're running out of time here, but we need to, in the high school level, not just offer health in the 10th grade, provide some workshops ahead of time so it's not just at orientation. Really thinking about that whole senior privilege. Are we doing a disservice to the young brain, and really maybe having some projects that students have to do their senior year? And so thinking about that. So just thinking about what we can do at the high school level, and having orientation and first year experience classes throughout the whole semester instead of just 2 days. And who are all the touch points on a college campus that could help know more about substance use prevention? Advising, faculty, coaches, parents. We call them the snowplow parents now instead of helicopter, because now they're intervening before something even happens with their student. So really thinking about what we can do ahead of time. And again, other pieces while they're in high school, connect them to other opportunities that they might connect when they're in college. You think about the students who are involved with volunteering or natural helpers or different programs. We have a group of 60 students in our high school involved with SOPO Unite, which is substance use prevention. And then what happens when they go to college? Well, what's there that's similar? So being resident assistant, peer educators through the health services, different work study positions. There's a lot of things that students could be involved with. And just to close with, we just had a huge youth summit with a number of high schools, and we taught students in sessions these following topics on restorative practice, mindfulness, stamping out stigma, intervening with peers. It's a program called Sidekicks, talking about social norms, and teaching people presentation skills. And you think about these topics, these can be lifelong sessions that people could continue to use well and into their adulthood. Please contact me with questions, or if you'd like some of these curriculums, I would be happy to share. Thank you so much. Have a great day.